Welcome to the I Am Programmer podcast.
Episode numero uno. So this was a great one, isn't it?
Yes, and there are many reasons for that, and I think this is going to be my favorite one for a long time because today's guest was Mark Thompson, who's also known as
Mark Texan.
Yes, Mark Texan is his internet name, and his real name is Mark Thompson, and he works for Google, and that too in the core Angular team. Now, if you have been following the Immigrant Programmers YouTube channel, you would already know why I personally love this guy and love what he does because I am a huge Angular fan, and he works in the Angular's core team. So that just blows my mind right away.
And since he works at Google, he shared some great tips and tricks on how you can join the Google workforce if you have this dream of getting a job at Google. So he shared some great insider scoop on it. And also we talked about different topics. He shared some great insight on how you can compare different front-end frameworks and choose what's best for your need, choose what's like specific.
Exactly, and not just front end. He basically told the secret recipe on what to choose, language, framework, be it front end or back end, on what is the best for your project. So we talked about that.
And also he shares how he likes to keep himself up to date and how you can do it too. Some great newsletters and some great tools that you could use to keep yourself up to date.
So what are we waiting for? Let's dive right into it. Yeah, so first of all, thanks again for coming to our channel. So we have started a small podcast series where we'll talk to programmers like you and YouTube creators who talk about programming, and we'll get to know more about them and also hopefully ask a few questions that can help new people who are just starting out. Maybe they can learn a few things from you as well.
From your experiences, yeah.
Exactly.
So
sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what this podcast will be about. It's not like an interview kind of a thing. It's like a two-way conversation.
Yeah.
You could ask questions from us as well if you want to know something about us.
Yeah.
And it's like a conversation that will it's a free-flowing conveation. So
That's what we aim. We don't want to
put you on the spot and ask you questions.
Exactly. We just want it to be like a free-flowing conversation. So we'll tell a little about you to our audience, and then maybe you can introduce yourself as well. So I have been working with Angular since almost 3 years, and I always try to stay up to date. And that's when I first saw you on Angular's YouTube channel, official YouTube channel, where you were you're telling some tips and tricks about Angular, and then you also posted a video on summarizing the V12 version. So and then we followed you on Twitter, and then we came to know that wow, you have a YouTube channel of your own. You go on talks, you go to some meetups, and
you're a mentor, and
exactly.
You work for Google as well. Maybe in the core team for Angular, we basically just went through your websites and your talks and everything.
Yeah, we basically stalked you on the internet.
We just did our homework.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, would you like to introduce a little?
Yeah. So my name is Mark Thompson, and you can find me online at Mark Texan. And right now, I'm working on the Angular team at Google, and I work in developer relations. And I've been writing code for quite a bit of time. I started coding much in my younger years, and I started writing some code then. And since then, I've worked as a senior software engineer before coming to Google, and I love to code and teach, and that's really my big passion.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And we were wondering, we went through your Twitter bio and your initial tweets, and we were like, you said that you teach in a university, and then you have a boot camp. You also make some YouTube videos. You go on talks, and you also work for Google. So how does that work? How do you get time to do all of that? And
Well, that's a great question. So before coming to Google, that's when I spent more time teaching at different universities, where I was really fortunate to win an award for my teaching, which is how I really got my heart into teaching. I was like, wow, this is a thing that I'm really good at, and I want to maintain that. So, but before Google is when I spent more time in universities. But the other thing, like the talks and YouTube content and making videos on Twitter, a lot of that stuff comes from, I try to be really structured, and I try to do things that matter to me, things that are meaningful to me. And so if I'm able to focus on that, that gives me free time to do some of the things that I really care about.
Well, okay. So you do work full time at Google as well, or is it a part time in the Angular team? Okay, wow,
No, I'm full
that's really
time on
good.
the Angular team.
That's really
That's
awesome.
amazing. Would you like to share some inside scoop? Some like some because I'm really it's really intriguing, and I'm very excited to know like how does it work? How's the team dynamics?
Yeah, like
Yes.
we spend our time learning Angular, and you are there, well, making Angular. So yeah, how does it work?
Yeah, the team is really great. So I know that so coming to Google, I had some options and some teams that I could have worked on. And I chose Angular because way back in a long time ago, almost 2011, when I switched from Java developer to full stack engineer, mostly front end, I chose Angular JS as like that first library that I would use. So then I took that experience, and that's what really opened up my career, because from there I was able to get some jobs at some pretty high profile companies, and I got some chances to give some conference. Some of my first ever like meetup talks were in Angular JS, and that really gave my career a boost. So when I came to Google and they gave me the option to go to the Angular team, I was like, yeah, this is a great way for me to give back to the framework that gave so much to me in my career.
So you directly started on Angular, the Angular 2 or Angular TypeScript, or you initially worked on the JavaScript development as well?
Oh, so I don't work at all on our legacy platform, Angular JS.
Oh, okay. So Angular TS.
JavaScript. Only Angular proper is where we spend I spend all of my time.
So yeah, since you've been working with Google, and like working at Google is a dream that like many developers have seen somewhere. Yeah, of course it is, and like
Including
many other developers, exactly, including him, and like many other developers out there that have they've always seen this dream of working at the Silicon Valley or like for Google. So could you share some insights or like some tips and tricks on how they can actually make this dream come true?
Yeah, so I could totally do that. The first thing I tell people is that you need to give yourself some time. And I just mean you need to be patient, because it's going to take you some time to start to practice the types of questions that you'll have to answer. It'll take some time for you to get good at solving algorithms in a good speed, because so let's say if you get an interview question, you really want to try to have a solution working pretty quickly, like a brute force solution. But there's like a technique to this whole thing, because people will say, oh, I have a algorithm problem. Let me go for the fastest, most efficient first. And that's actually not the way to do it. I would say get something working first. Make sure so I'll say get something working. And then when you first get the question, because this is the hardest part, I'll be honest with you, that's the hardest part, is when you get the questions. I tell people, first make sure you've asked what I like to call clarifying questions. So I want you to ask, so if I give you a question, say, well, I want to know how many cars are going to, go around this track at the same time in a 10-minute interval. And so if I tell you that, then you might say, okay, you might start writing code, but you don't know any details. So first, ask all the questions to make sure that you understand the problem. And so that has to be like a built-in practice, because developers do this thing where we jump right into the problem without even thinking about it. That has to become your process, where you ask clarifying questions. Make sure you understand what's being asked of you. Make sure you understand the parameters. So maybe you could say, well, will any cars be going backwards? Right? Probably didn't even think to ask that. Or will any cars not be moving? Will any cars have zero velocity? Right? Is acceleration the same for all cars? Right? So you have to ask questions like that, because then that could really open up the solution for you, because it's not really meant to trick you with these questions. It's meant to see how you think and how you solve problems. So that's the first thing I tell people. So have time, think about the clarifying questions, and practice. Those are my main tips.
That's great. So like basically define all the use cases before you start to code. Just like make everything clear. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and in any real world scenario, I mean, that is exactly any person would think. But it's just that when people come to coding and they just try to, just jump into it. But in the real world, if someone tells you to meet me at McDonald's, people would first ask, well, which McDonald's? There are 5 McDonald's in my area, and which one is open after 12? Exactly. So people think those questions in the real life, and I totally agree. We need to think those in the coder life as well. We can say, yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
And we were hearing a talk about you, and
Yeah, the
you had
other
a very interesting perspective on
viewpoint.
something.
Yeah. So the other day we were listening to a talk and we came across this concept of yours, stinking thinking.
Yeah.
So we
Oh.
really like we really like stinking thinking. But like for those who don't know what stinking thinking is, could you please elaborate a little bit on it?
Yeah, so the context for this is that I gave a talk about how I myself went from what I call an adversary to bootcamp developers or like
Mhm.
self-taught people to becoming an advocate and really wanted to help those people. And what I said that blocked my vision or and understanding was what I call stinking thinking, because I felt like, well, I worked so hard to go to graduate
Yeah.
school, I worked so hard to do this process, so you have to do the same way or it's not valid. And I think that that's really toxic, or it's stinking thinking, right? Your thinking is really bad when you start to try to create ways to keep people out. When you really should be thinking the opposite way is, how do you bring more people in?
Well, yeah, and I mean, you have a great style of teaching as well. Like you put in some jokes in between, make the conversation very light, which we really enjoyed. And so let's say you said you have a boot camp. So let's say I or anyone else want to learn from you or want to join your course or your tutorials. How can we do that?
Yeah, sure. So I was developing a course. I still am developing it, but I'm just really busy. So I have to remember I talked about like priorities and doing things that are really important.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
This is an important thing for me to do overall. Is I want to develop a course to really help people. And if you want to learn from me right now, so there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can, enjoy the free content that I put out on YouTube or things on. I don't really tweet as much tech content on Twitter. I more show the holistic view of what it means to be a human in technology. Yeah. But my YouTube channel is definitely like technology videos, and I'm going to be doing more with that stuff. And then another thing is I do offer mentorship to people. Right now, I don't have any spaces available, but I let people, I actually took on a mentor probably a mentee about 5 weeks ago, and I was coaching her through her process of finishing her boot camp that she was in a different boot camp, and her boot camp, and then how she made it up to her first job, which she got her first job, which is great. And so,
that's great.
So those are some ways you can learn from me.
That's really awesome. I mean, after the chat, you can send us some links, and we'll put all of them down in the description. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, they can definitely do that.
Exactly, and we're going to also put all your social handles down in this description again, so that people can talk to you directly. Yeah,
definitely. And you know what? When we were also listening to your call, I noticed a very interesting thing. So both of us came to Canada as freshers, so we didn't really had a full-time job throughout our life, and we came here for our masters. And after when we were trying to find a job, people were saying that because you are freshers, you don't have any experience, it will be very difficult for you to find a job. And we were like, yes, it might be a little difficult. There might be some jobs out there which might require 5 years or 4 years or 3 years of experience, but there has to be a job which a fresher can find, because at one point of time, every engineer, every developer has 0 years of experience, and like that's just natural. There's no way. There's almost no way.
People gotta start somewhere.
Exactly. There's almost no way to go around it, and that's what you mentioned as well. That initially you did not like that very much, but eventually you started saying that mentors are really important, because when I think personally that if anyone doesn't mentor someone, there's really no purpose of their job. Like if someone is working for a company and they are not mentoring anyone, they're just thinking that they're the best in working and not improving, helping others improve. First of all, they will themselves start falling behind. That's just my perspective, because when you teach because when I personally teach someone something, even my concepts become clearer, and then it feels like we have a more purpose. Like people. As you said, I'm sure whenever you mentor someone and he or she gets a job, you must feel really awesome. That's just what I think.
Yeah, I think mentorship is very important. And for me, just like you said, I find that when I'm helping other people learn something, my own understanding is so much stronger, which is something I talked about, like you said, in that one talk, about how I became a better engineer by teaching people and helping people, because it just really unlocks some really important things. And for me, it's really meaningful, because I have a mentor. Right?
Yeah.
I have actually a mentor at Google who is phenomenal, and then I have a mentor just like that has followed me in my career who continues to guide me, and I know that I get value from their mentorship, so I
Yeah.
want to provide value to other people and pass it forward. Right? I want to pay it forward to others.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, that's
Exactly.
right. That's right.
Exactly. And this brings me to another question. So, like, since you do a lot of things, and since we know that like technology is already like an ever-growing field, there's
Yeah.
something new coming up like every now and then. So it's really, really hard to keep yourself up to date with like the trends in technology, because there's just so much. It gets overwhelming at some point. So, and you already do a lot of stuff, I know. How do you find the time to keep yourself up to date, and what are the, I don't know, the mechanisms that you use to like keep yourself up to date with the new trends in technology?
Yeah.
Sure. So I use quite a few different small, like micro techniques that
Okay.
end up keeping me like my head like focused on what's happening. So you're
Okay.
right. So falling behind in engineering, it can be potentially dangerous because your skills might get outdated because you don't know what's
Exactly.
happening. That actually
Yeah.
happened to me when I was working early in my career. I had a really hard time getting out of a job because I only knew the work that I was doing. And
Yeah.
so I went on dozens and dozens of interviews, got so many no's because they said, well, you're just not, you're not have the skills that we need for right now. So ever since that day, here's what I do. So one big helper is this thing called a technology radar. Okay, so there are a couple of companies that do this. ThoughtWorks does it. Another company called Red Monk, they have a technology radar. So I always read those because that'll tell you,
Very
you know,
interesting.
emerging technologies, like technology you should definitely be adopting, what you should pause on, and you can make whatever decision that you want. You don't have to
Mhm.
decide, but at least you get to know. Another thing
Exactly.
is, so that's one thing. Another thing is Twitter. I look at what people are talking about. Whether or not I'm going to pursue it is different, but I just look at what people are talking about, and I can get an
Mhm.
idea. Like, oh, like people love the Jamstack. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I need to know more about the Jamstack eventually. Or when I figured out that things like Vue were getting really popular, I was just noticing the trends online and say, okay, well, people love Vue. I wonder why they
Mhm.
love it so much, right? Not so much as like, oh, they can't love Vue, they should love Angular. It's more like, oh,
Yeah.
that's just another tool out there that people love. So I wonder why they love it. And then the final thing that I do is I subscribe to some newsletters that come
Mhm.
out, and I skim through the newsletter. And here's the difference. I wait to see what keeps repeating week after week. So if I see something
That's a
continue
great
to
point.
come up in the newsletter, then I'm like, okay, this is worth me at least doing a Google search on. Let me
Mhm.
find out what's
Interesting.
happening.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, in your first point, you mentioned that a few companies have their kind of trend that how they keep a track of which technologies are emerging. So, we will definitely re-listen to that and subscribe to those. And
Mhm.
and same for the newsletter. Like I right now personally, I'm subscribed to like 20 different newsletters, and all of them are sending like at least one email every day, if not more. And I'm like, oh my God, how will I go through all of them? Because when we started the YouTube channel, our main goal was to basically whatever we know, we want to make a video on that so that people can learn that.
It was just to share our knowledge with
Exactly.
people. So
Exactly. And,
that was the goal.
so we were like, and we both of us started putting ourselves under pressure that, well, if 10 new things are coming out this month, we need to know all 10 of them and create some videos on them so
Mm-hmm.
that people can know them. But then we started realizing, well, that's not really practical, and maybe we should focus on a few things more than others.
Exactly. So we started prioritizing. That was the key. I mean,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we need to filter some things out.
Exactly.
And what you mentioned,
Yeah.
if something is mentioned like in 10 different newsletters for at least 3 or 4 times, then it means it's something special.
Yeah,
And
we need to spend more time on
Exactly.
it. We need to know more about it.
Mhm.
Exactly. So another question. I'm sorry, if I'm being selfish. I'm asking
No, please.
that
Ask all the way.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you. And the question is that since we're just like starting out in our career as well, in our professional career as programmers, this is something that I think about a lot, which is that if I need to be the jack of all trades, if it's okay to be the jack of all trades and master of none, or should I really master a technology or like a language, a framework, really master it, and then know a little bit about like the rest of the frameworks.
Yeah.
So
and before you can answer, we will also give you a little what I think, or what both of us think, if she agrees.
Yeah, I'd
I
love to
think
hear your
that
feedback. Yeah.
yeah, I think that right now I personally prefer to be a jack of all trade and kind of master of none, because from what I have been reading and looking into is that if you know something, if you know one thing and no one else knows it better than you, that thing might just go away in 3 or 4 years. So I personally started doing, okay, I should know a little Docker, so that if my company, if my job requires some knowledge of Docker or Kubernetes or AWS or Angular, I should know that. I shouldn't be like, I have no idea what that is and I'm not going to do that. Like, just to be open to new challenges, I think I should be a jack of all trades. And if I'm working on one thing for a long time, I'll naturally become a master of that. But some people have a completely different perspective. So like, what's yours?
Well, so here's what I think. So that's a tough one, because I feel like I get really excited about new technology. So if I see something new, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to work with that. And I never get a chance to do it, but in my mind, I'm thinking that. So here's what I would tell people to do. First, and this is very practical, right? So this is not philosophical. This is very practical. Do you need a job? Right? Like, are you working or not? So if you're not working, I would look at what's hot in my area, what the job listings are asking for, and I would learn that as quickly as possible. Do some tutorials, start to get up to speed with what's in my area. Because when you need a job, like, eating comes first, right? Yeah. Eating comes before curiosity. So do that. Then the second thing is as I think about, okay, so what happens long term in your career? I think what's really interesting is understanding the underlying trends of what's important. So should you learn AWS or Google Cloud Platform? I think you should understand what cloud means, right? And what the cloud services do, because they all kind of do the same outcome with different approaches. Exactly, right. So if you understand what AWS does, then at a high level, then you understand what Google Cloud does. Then you have to like nail in and say, well, which one is right for you, right? And so, but you got to understand what's happening. Just like with front end frameworks, what's really interesting about React and Vue and Angular is like the idea of reactive programming that's in there, right? So understand reactive programming, because then you could jump between. That's what I loved about. That's why when I did Flutter for a while, I was doing some Flutter development. For mobile, so Flutter is a mobile cross-platform framework. Where you write once, run everywhere, right? The reason I was able to jump into it is because I was teaching React for a while, and I understood, okay, you update the state, and then the state determines how the screen looks. So if you understand that pattern, it was quick to jump into this other thing. So when I got into Angular, that's the pattern that I was looking for. Okay, if I update the state, I want the screen to update, versus me manually, like this imperative style, like, and I want reactive programming, because that's what's important. And I think Vue is similar. I don't know. I've never written Vue code, but I imagine that Vue is probably similar. Update the state, and then the screen changes to the actual state. But you see how it doesn't matter if I knew Vue or not to understand that concept. Right?
Exactly.
That's what you should focus on.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. So basically, if you have your basics clear, then you can work basically with any language or framework. It's like if you know how to write a for loop or a recursive function.
Yeah, you can write it in pretty much any language.
Exactly. And that's also a very good point. The first point you mentioned, that about the job, because we have a very small following now. We have around 800 subscribers, but almost every day thank you very much. But I'm seriously saying that I think it's a small following, and still we get one email or message every day just asking us if we should learn Angular, React, or Vue. And that's why we also created a small short on it, and said that we said exactly the same thing. We said, my personal favorite is Angular, but it doesn't mean you have to do that. All of them are great. And if you're trying to find a job, all you need to do is go to LinkedIn, if it works in your country or city, and just search JavaScript jobs, or just search Angular and see how many jobs you get. If you get 200 jobs and search React, if you get 1,000 jobs, that means you need to learn React in your area, because you're trying to find a job. So exactly. You need to eat first. People get caught into discussions that some people are saying React is better, some are saying Angular is better. And I mean, maybe in front of you we should not say React is better, but
No,
But
but
Depends. What are you building? It
exactly.
might make sense to use React,
Yeah.
right? Or
Mhm.
use Vue, or use Felt.
Exactly.
Svelte.
Mhm.
How do you say that? Svelte? Yeah. Use Felt. Like that seems
Yeah.
pretty cool. People love that thing too.
Yeah, I've
Exactly. It
never
depends
worked
on
with
the kind of application you're building, your
Exactly.
use case. The
Mhm.
concept is pretty much the same,
Yeah.
the underlying concept, but like what framework you want to use is like up to your application,
Yeah.
what you want to do with it, where you want to go with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I tell people this. They ask me about Angular, like when should they use Angular? I think Angular is all about scale, right?
Mhm.
So everybody has an application that they want to build, and nobody wants to stay with 50 monthly active users, right? No, here's what you really want. You really want 200,000 monthly users, right? Because you want your application to scale, you want to reach a large audience, right? So when I think about Angular for people, that platform has been tuned for scale. When you want to scale up your application to high users, high traffic, like that's what I feel like Angular is really, really great at. And it may not make sense for every application. Some applications, like, you might build like a small, like, recipe application. Yeah, you can build that with Angular. But it might be like using a hammer for a thumbtack.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it may be overkill. You might just be able to do something, a platform that's more used to like a small scale. But when you're going to build something like Google Cloud Platform, that thing is used by tens and hundreds of thousands of people. So that you need scale for. So that's where I tell people, well, think about where are you going? Where are you going is a really good question to ask yourself.
Exactly.
Where are you going? If you're going to the top, right, in scale and you want to go big, I think Angular is a great choice for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
people really need to understand that, because whenever we go check on different forums and Twitter, there's like two groups. There's like Angular haters and Angular lovers and preachers.
Yeah.
So I know that whenever especially like because he uses Angular a lot, I work like mostly in the backend. So he gets a lot of hate whenever he says like I talk about Angular. It's funny.
I tweeted something about Angular, and people were like, okay, we are going to unfollow you. And
yes, unfollow and subscribe. Just because
okay.
Right. And then some people said Angular is the best. Like it's always a comparison, and we just think that exactly what you said. It depends on your project. Maybe your project doesn't even need a single page application. Maybe it needs everything to be server side rendered. Like people are all talking about Angular React, but maybe both of them are not good for you. And
exactly.
That's right.
Yeah,
exactly. Now, since we're talking about jobs and how to apply for jobs, and since we're on this conversation, I would like to ask another question. So, we saw that you have a profile, you have a portfolio, your own portfolio. So, how important do you think is it to have like a portfolio when you apply for jobs?
I think that's going to be dependent on your level. Right. So if you're coming in as a junior, a portfolio might weigh a little bit heavier for you because you have to demonstrate that you can actually code.
Yeah.
I would hire somebody without a portfolio if they have a strong interview, but I know that some hiring managers will say, well, I need to see your portfolio. I need to see what you built. I think as you get more senior, it's more and more reasonable. Like, for example, my GitHub is filled with demos and half-finished projects, right? Not that many big things, because a lot of my work before Google was private, right? When I was working at American Express, like that work was private. So you will never see the code that I wrote. And my GitHub squares are completely empty, right? Because it's as if I made like something small. So I don't really care about like people's GitHub profiles and how many times they've committed. And I'll say this, I know that there are some organizations that do care about that. And I will say, if somebody cares about if you're coding every day, you don't want to work there unless you just have to take that job. I think that's a job that you have no other choice you take, because if that's what they're valuing, then they're also not valuing your like personal health. And I mean that, right? Because I don't write code every day. I have a family, right? Like, and I have other things. I have to rest. So if somebody's looking at my GitHub and says, oh, he doesn't write code every day, like, so what? I don't want to work here. Right? Like you go ahead, you go find somebody who writes code every single day, doesn't sleep. That person is waiting for you. I'm not that person.
Exactly. We're coders, but we have a life too. So there's that.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Right.
So exactly. So it's okay to not have those GitHub squares. Like, it's not important to have like those green GitHub squares, but it's still important to have a GitHub profile, right? I mean, when you're going out there,
Mm-hmm.
you want to display your skills, and
And maybe not even for
Mm-hmm.
displaying, maybe let's say you are just 18, 19 in a college or a university and you have some projects of your own. I think it's better than keeping those projects on a hard disk or on a pen
exactly.
drive to upload them on GitHub. Maybe you learn how to commit things, how to push things, and
Because in our opinion, like Git and GitHub are really, I think, important skills to have today, because all the companies use them
yeah,
in one form or
That's
another.
true.
Some use GitLab, some use Bitbucket, but whatever. I mean, whatever tool they use, but like everyone uses Git today. So it's really an important important skill to have when you go and apply for jobs. So when you have a
Mm-hmm.
GitHub profile, you can upload your hobby projects, or maybe like, any project that you're
Mhm.
working on. It will, I think, in our opinion, will serve two purpose. This will like display or show your GitHub skills to your
Mm-hmm.
potential
Mm-hmm.
employer, and this will also show them that, I mean, you're not all about academics. You have like little
Mm.
hobbies and little hobby projects as well. So you're not just sticking to your academic portfolio, or like whatever you're asked in
Yeah,
school.
yeah, because from what we experienced, that because as you know already now that we didn't have any experience, so this is the GitHub was a tool that we used to show our experience. We said, well, I don't have a
Mm.
professional experience, but you can see I have 5 Angular, 2 Android, and 3 Node.js projects that I created from scratch, and all of them do this, this, this. So that is how you can see that I know kind of how to code. Now, granted, it is very different in your experience. Like if you have been working for 5, 6, 7 years, you have a family, the company should not expect you to code every day. I totally agree with that. But if you are
Yeah.
just out of college, maybe 19, 20 years old, having something on GitHub wouldn't hurt. That's just our
Well, I
opinion.
agree with you actually that because for me personally, so one really important caveat is that I was in college 20 years ago. Okay,
Very true.
so
Yeah.
there was no GitHub when I was in college, and we used CVS. We didn't use even Git back then, right?
Oh,
We used
CVS.
CVS for
Okay.
like version control, right?
Mhm.
So it was different for me, which I totally get. So here's why I can see and agree with your point. As long as it's a part of the story, because you're telling a story, right? The
Yeah.
story you're telling me is not that you code every day, is that you work hard
Mhm.
and that you have initiative. So I can get behind it if it's a part of your story. But if you have a different story,
Great point.
then that's fine. You see what I'm saying? Like this is just one way
Yeah.
to tell that story about
Mhm.
what makes you stand out as a candidate. So if you do have a profile, like a repository that you want me to look at, I
Mhm.
just tell you this: if you're a candidate out there, show me your best projects. Don't show me the half finished ones. You can have them in there, but have me look at the things that you are proud of. And let me tell you why, because I've looked at candidates' profiles and I found code that was kind of bad, and I'm like, oh man, they didn't even get the
Yeah.
basics right on this one.
Mhm.
So that looks really bad. So it's okay to have projects that aren't good. Just make sure you show me your good ones, right? Put your
Yeah.
best foot forward and show me the ones,
Yeah.
because anything you show me, I'm going to critique and look at with a
Mhm.
critical eye. Even your resume, right? So don't write on your resume that you know C# just because you did one Udemy course 5 years ago,
Yeah.
and now you're like, yeah, I have C#. Because I tell people this is my rule. This might be controversial, but don't put it on your resume if I could not interview you about it. So if I
Good
find
point.
some C# questions and you can't answer them, that makes it look worse. So I would rather you just have your core languages on your resume then. Put like the things you're good at on your resume, because that's what we're going to talk to you about.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, it's just some people try to put a lot of things in their resume just to show off or like kind of fake that they know everything. But yeah, that's true. No.
Yeah, we were doing interviews for like the company that I work for. So we were looking for like developers, experienced and like freshers, for some fresher developers as well. So we went through like a lot of resumes, and there was like one in particular that was a 5-page long resume. And given that this person had no industry experience, he was a fresher and had a 5 page long experience.
And not even with empty spaces. It was like filled like an essay or something.
Of what?
So
You have no experience. What
that's
did he
what
write about?
exactly.
Yeah,
That's
That's
what
the
we
point,
were.
right? Yeah.
I'm sure she didn't read it through.
So yeah.
So we have different styles of learning and everything, right? So I'm a kind of person who likes learning by watching video tutorials, and some people really prefer going through the documentation and learning, I would say, the hard way. So what do you prefer?
It all depends. So for me, I'm pretty big on documentation at this point in my career because I can find out what I need faster when there's good documentation.
That's true.
Because usually the questions that I'm asking are just different than what somebody who's maybe newer in their career is. Because let's say I'm writing or I'm coding up a new app, and I'm really interested in how this API interacts with another API. So I'm not going to really find a video as helpful on that. Yeah. Because I'm really interested in the like actual details, like what are the actual parameters, what are the types that we're talking about, what's the expected return value. So for example, when I was doing some RxJS stuff, I wanted the documentation because I want to know, okay, well, which thing is returning a subscription, which thing is returning an observable, which thing is returning something, right? So I can really understand that way. But then if it's something brand new and I'm just surveying a new technology, I like video tutorials because I like to hear where people are struggling, and they usually will tell you oh, I really love, this framework, but here's the part that I'm stuck on, or here's the part that's kind of hard. So I like to watch when it's something brand new. Like if you told me, hey, Mark, I want you to learn Svelte. This is exactly what I would do. I would go to the Svelte website. I do the getting started tutorial, try to build something. Then I watch some videos to see what other people are doing and to see how they took it on. And then I kind of decide if I need to go back to documentation or if I'll stick with videos.
Yeah, that's a good point. So basically, you just get a quick start, a booster start with the documentation, and then decide if videos are important. I'll try that for my next for my next project.
Because I think whenever we want to do something, our first reaction is to just go on Google and type and just maybe go through Stack Overflow, just try to find a video on YouTube so we can get some insight. I mean, that's our first reaction. I would not say we're afraid of diving into the documentation. Not that, but I don't know, that's the first reaction that we have to try to find a video on it to get some insight. Maybe because we're more visual learners.
Maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we have this section at the end of the podcast. We ask 4 questions. So we like to call it the Coder's Quotro. And we ask these 4 same questions to all our guests.
Yeah.
And so we're going to go to that section and I'm going to ask you the first question. So what framework, technology, language do you think a new developer should learn?
Yeah, in 2021, if someone is just starting coding and wants to learn a couple of things that would help him or her to get a job, what is the one thing that?
And I forgot to mention the slash. So it's a framework / technology / language.
Oh, sure. I think if you're first starting, I would learn TypeScript.
Okay.
I think that's the future of JavaScript and web development. I would probably, if you're first learning, I learned TypeScript, and then I'd also learn some type of database solution. So whether it be Firebase, MongoDB, I like document databases for beginners because they're just a little bit easier because of the lack of constraints on the data structure, right? Yeah. So, and I probably would learn some database thing, and then I would learn how to deploy my application. 1,000%. Got to learn how to deploy. So I don't care if you use GitHub Pages, if you use Firebase Cloud Functions, Google Cloud, AWS, Heroku. Pick something and learn how to deploy, because the best thing you can do is get your application off of your machine. That's when it becomes real.
Yeah, that's a great point. The things database and deployment, they're kind of very underrated because people don't really try to learn them or go through them because, I don't know, maybe they don't sound fancy or what, or they sound complicated. I don't know what's the reason, but people just want to usually just create a static website and then be
Yeah, so that's what we've seen as well. Like even on the forums, and we get a lot of question about this as well. That the primary focus of the new developers are on either like front end framework or back end framework. So the question we get is,
Yeah.
what should we focus on? Should we go more towards back end? Should we go more towards front end? I mean, that's the only aspect that they consider in the beginning. I mean, because we know that deployment and like focusing on database and stuff, they're like really important things. And the learning a front-end framework alone won't help you much. I mean,
Yeah.
even like,
But you know what? To be fair, like it's just coming to my mind right now that maybe when a person works in the front end, maybe it's easier for them to visualize. Maybe that's what helps new developers, and to realize that something is actually working. Rather than seeing a terminal and complicated software, maybe just seeing a
yeah, but like since I work like mostly in the backend, so like working on Node.js alone isn't going to help you. You're gonna develop you're gonna develop the backend of the application, but you gotta use the database to interact and to store the data that you fetch. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, and it's important to learn the database and the cloud as well. So moving on to the next question. When you want to learn something new, what do you prefer watching with? We already covered this one. So you said you're going to start with documentation and then try to look for like more videos if you need more information about it.
Right.
Okay. So we go on to the third one. This is going to be an interesting one since you run your own bootcamp. So the question is, do you think going to college or university is important?
Yes, but with the caveat that I tell people, do what works for you. So I learned so much from going to undergraduate and then graduate school. Like I learned a ton. I did some really meaningful research that I would not have been able to do outside of those places. Right. So I do think college is important, but I do not think it's the only way. Right. So I have taught so many boot camps. And and I've seen students who were meant to be engineers. Like they were so good without college, right? They just came in and it was like their calling almost to be a programmer. Like I had one student who was a math teacher, and she was so freaking good when she learned how to write code. And then she went on and got a job at Airbnb. Like that's how good she was without any engineering school. But I do think there's a place for engineering school. Like if you go to school like the 4 years, you will learn a breadth of things, right? But where it comes to boot camps, it's very narrow. Like we can be honest about this, and this isn't a negative about boot camps. It's a very narrow thing. We teach you as much as we can to make you practical programmers, where you can create something and do some work. Right? We teach you that, and that's fine, right? But I do think that you can learn. Like I don't know any boot camps that teach computer vision. I don't know any boot camps that teach now they're starting to show with like ML and AI, but like I took an AI class in graduate school, which was super hard, which I think I got like a C on that.
I remember class. It was hard.
That was super hard. But, I learned a lot of stuff and I got to meet some incredible people. So I think that it is important if that's what you value, right? Those types of lessons. But if you don't, I think you can go really far self-taught or from a boot camp.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's fair. That's
very true. And I also remember the other person that you mentioned who was a landscaper, I think. And then he went on to solve the dashboard problems.
Oh yeah.
Change the hardware of the car.
He never went to college. He didn't even go for anything. But he took his car apart and started building like hardware for his car. That's what I'm saying. So that's why I love the idea that a boot camp does exist for people. But I do think there's a lot of value in undergraduate education as a CS education as well.
Exactly. And we have a lot of examples to prove that.
And one other thing about that, I would just say for college, boot camps are condensed too. That's the other thing. It's like between 10 weeks to 24 weeks. Some people just learn at a slower pace.
Yeah.
Right? And going over the 4 years, you just get time to grow into it. Versus you're 6 months in a boot camp, you might be defeated and just say, I didn't get it in 6 months. It's not meant for me, which I don't think is true. I think maybe you need a different style. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
That's very true.
So are all the, just a follow-up question, that's not my next question. So are all the boot camps like 6 months to like, so you said 10 weeks to 24 weeks? Are all of them like that? Or do we have like a boot camp that could last up to like an year or something? Maybe like a crash
I
course?
think there are a very few that last about a year, but I know that
Okay.
the majority of boot camps out there are somewhere between, 3 months to 6 months is like the time that they do it. And there are some that do extend that year, but
Okay.
the average that I've seen is about 6 months.
Okay, majority is about 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
going to the final questions of our Coders Quattro section is, and this is a very easy question. What's your favorite programming language? Your personal favorite?
Oh, I love JavaScript. JavaScript
JavaScript.
is just a magical language. I know people don't like it because it has some quirks that they don't understand. And it's frustrating at times, but JavaScript just to me, it just unlocks so much. You can do web, you can do mobile, right? You can even create desktop apps like VS Code was written in TypeScript technically, but it's still a JavaScript type style language, right? I mean, but look at what you can create with that one language across so many spaces. And it's really like you can do whatever you want, and I think that that's really amazing.
True.
So I love JavaScript.
Exactly. So when we did our studies in Java. So like academically, we always use Java. But when we started working, I did like a Udemy course because the job that I applied for was for JavaScript.
Yeah, we were applying for everything left, right, and center.
Yeah. when we completed our masters, and like the only purpose in life we had was to get a job. And like before we complete our masters, even before we complete our master, we started applying. So the job we applied for was for like JavaScript, and then like I did a course on Udemy to learn JavaScript because like it was a completely new language for me. And I realized, I mean, there's so much you could do with JavaScript. If you know the basics, if you know JavaScript, you can work both in the front end as well as in the back end. I mean, it's just one language that I want to learn.
That's right. That's
so
true.
Yeah, that was the best thing that I could feel. But like a lot of people argue, again, you already mentioned that there's like a little subtleties, I would say, or like some quirks in JavaScript that people don't understand. And that's why they don't prefer JavaScript. But like, I would say, how do you think, like, do you think TypeScript is better than JavaScript because it has it has some type constraints, and that avoids you to make some silly mistakes, I would say, while coding?
Yeah, personally, personally, we like TypeScript, but one of the mentors in the company we used to work for was totally against it. He was like, the only reason I use JavaScript was it has no types and it's fast. TypeScript makes everything complicated and slow, and that was just his opinion, and he was kind of an experienced programmer.
And I think that that's fine. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I was just saying that, but sometimes, because I work with JavaScript a lot, but sometimes I do feel that there at some places, I get a little bit frustrating when I do not know what to expect. What type to expect, and like what am I going to receive? Is it an object, an array? Because like since we're a small company, we're not that good with our documentation. So that's like the cherry on the top. So I sometimes I face this problem. So I sometimes wonder, I mean, is it better to change the code base on like from JavaScript to TypeScript? Would it be better to use TypeScript?
Yeah, that's a tough question because every like company is different and your needs are different. So for me, the reason I like TypeScript, to be honest with you, is because I'm a person who likes structure. In general, I like structure. In my personal life, like if I could eat the same thing for 4 out of my 5 meals, that's easy for me because the structure takes the guesswork out of what's going to happen, right? So that's why I like TypeScript, because I started with Java. And I wanted an interface because I'm like, yeah, this thing doesn't need to like be a part of the prototypical inheritance. I just wanted to have some shared behavior that I can count on, right? This contract. I want that. I want to be able to use generics. So I can say, yeah, it's going to be a thing and the type, right? So all the reasons why we love TypeScript. But I do say this. That's why I say, TypeScript, though, is a heavy cognitive load for people because because it's essentially Java, right? So if people thought that Java was hard to learn, TypeScript is going to have a very similar experience because there's literally, if you could do it in Java, it's almost the same syntax in TypeScript, right? Like
Exactly.
the same ideas, abstract classes, interfaces, final, private, like all those types of keywords that you don't really have. Well, TypeScript creates those things. So if you like Java, you'll love TypeScript. So
yeah,
that's true.
That's true.
Yeah, I personally prefer TypeScript. I'm not very organized and structured in my personal life. I'm a mess, but I do still prefer TypeScript.
Yeah, but he really like to structure his code.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like I don't like to see name of a variable and then start imagining or have to print it just to know its type. Like that is, I hate that.
That's it. That's it. That console.log, just so you can know what the output of this function is going to be, or the variable. That's right. That's right.
And that's the story of my life.
Yeah,
that's right. That's why I love TypeScript, because you get that certainty of like, okay, this function is going to return X type, whether it be a number or a string or a date or some other object.
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect.
Exactly. Perfect. So that was all our questions, and since we know you're a busy man, we won't keep you for much.
It was great talking to you.
Yeah, it was an honor. It was great talking to you.
We feel like we know you since a long time. Like the conversation and all your answers were really awesome.
Exactly. And it is, just to tell our audience, this is the first interaction that we're having, and we didn't prepare nothing. We didn't meet like 10 minutes, 15 minutes before to prepare the interview. This was like bang on, like on the spot, everything. Yeah. So it's been great.
Yeah. This is my first time talking to them like on camera, or actually at all outside of messages. So friends at home, this is an authentic conversation between two strangers. I guess you all know each other, but we're still strangers. Yeah. So it's pretty great. It's been great to talk to you all. You all are fantastic.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. So just if you could request the audience to subscribe to our channel and like the video if they like our content, it will be great.
Oh, I would totally do that. So, hey, friends at home, listen, if you are enjoying these types of conversations or the great course content that they put out on this YouTube channel, you have to do 3 things for me. 1, you need to comment down below and let them know that you appreciate them. 2, you have to like this video. And 3, you have to subscribe.
Wow.
Oh, wow. That was awesome. Thank you so much. I'm sure they're going to do it now.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do it for us, do it for him.
Yeah, do it for Mark. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
We really appreciate your time.
No problem. It's my pleasure.
Okay.
All right. Bye. Ciao.
All right. Bye for now.